This live presentation was produced in Ashland, Oregon by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. RVML relies on the support of our volunteers, members, and donors to organize and present these programs. For more information about this presentation, or to borrow, download, or purchase other recordings from our catalog, please visit our website at rvml.org.
Thank you and welcome. I really appreciate you gifting me with some of your time this evening to share this adventure with you. How did I happen to be here, and how did this topic come up for me? Well, first I want to say how I see the evening. It's just very casual because we're a small group, and I want to plant seeds. I just want to share my experience and insights that I've gained, and I'm hoping it plants the seeds and it gives you thoughts and it gives you direction, and I'm wanting you to find your truth about what is the sacred masculine and start to explore that. I just kind of want to have a foundation and a starting point, but invite you to find what it means to you. So I started on this adventure about a little over 2.5 years ago. I went to a healing prayer service and woke up in the middle of the night with just a really strong sense of Joseph. Joseph, I like to refer to him as the earthly father of the Christ, the Josef and Mary Joseph, and was a little bit puzzled about that. But then kind of remembered a few months earlier, I'd kind of had a glimpse of this biblical figure standing in my living room, and kind of walked by and went, okay, and went back and went, yeah, and just saying, I don't know who you are, but please go away. This is really frightening me. Fortunately, I had a couple of friends who have had mystical experiences, so I had them to talk to and share, and then they were very supportive about just, well, be with this experience. And then I started to reflect and realize that I've had this connection with Joseph actually since I was in utero. When I was in utero, my nickname was Josephine Elizabeth Bridget. And I asked my mom, and she said it just came to her. She doesn't have any reason why she said that. But I also have a sister that's 5 years older and a brother that's 2.5. So you can imagine these little toddlers, when they would ask, what's this baby's name, they would say that. And as a child, I was raised Catholic, and as a child, I was really fascinated by Joseph. And I was just really curious as to why we didn't talk about this man. Who was this man? Because clearly, he was a very active part of the Christ child's life. And in the Bible, they speak of him, but there is not one quote from this man in the Bible. And I just really puzzled about him. And I think it's, and I think now to speak to him, I think he really is a wonderful representative of what fatherhood is, to father a child that, are you the father or not? But that didn't matter. He stepped forward to parent this child and to be with this amazing woman. And I believe there's really wonderful, rich stories that we can learn and we can connect to from that. And so that's what made me really bring in the piece of the sacred masculine, to just really feel that I think he really represents it. And then when I reflected on the healing service, it made sense to me that, we're very well aware of Jesus, Yeshua, I like that pronunciation, and Mother Mary. We've talked about them a lot, we've known about them. And the Magdalene's been coming forward, and a lot of people are connected with her and speak to her. And then it occurred to me that Joseph is the missing piece, that Joseph is what rounds it out. There's Mary, Mother Mary with her partner, and there's Yeshua and Magdalene together, depending on what you believe and what you accept. And it really brought this balance. And I think that's the piece of the sacred masculine, not for it to rise above, but for it to step forward to bring balance, so we can look within ourselves and individually know what is our sacred feminine and what is our sacred masculine, and what does our sacred union look like, how to find the balance within ourselves. Also, it's occurred to me that a lot of pieces that we've attributed to masculine, are they really? Excuse me. I have a sense that we've ascribed a lot of things to gender that really have nothing to do with gender. And to start just kind of releasing some of those labels and really looking at it. And I think a really powerful way to start is to, I think it's time to bury the patriarchy. I believe the patriarchy actually died a number of years ago, and we've kept it alive by our fears and by our belief systems. And I also believe that the masculine got it, connected to the patriarchy, and I think that's been a real disservice, that the patriarchy is the patriarchy. It's an entity of itself, and to bury it with honor and dignity and glory and gratitude for all the lessons that it brought, and then to free up the masculine and start to pose that question: what is masculine? What does it really look like? And to have those models and those archetypes to start to follow and find it within yourself. For myself, I can speak to it because I've had a kind of very masculine aspect of my life. I've been very left brain. I was in the corporate world. I was a programmer. That's linear, that's sequential. And I was also the primary wage earner in my marriage. So I was paying the bills, and when I divorced, I almost had to pay alimony. So I have a lot of empathy and compassion for a masculine piece. I also have a sense of my warrior, and I also have a sense of my fire. And within that also, knowing my feminine and what is my balance, where's my balance point, and what does that look like for me? The one thing with burying the patriarchy, the word that comes up too, a really strong word, is resolution. How can we take things to resolution rather than releasing them? Because to me, releasing just sets things free, and they may come back or they may land on somebody else, but I like resolution. It really feels like a completeness to me, to just really settle down and let it be in the past where it is, so we can be present and move forward. So with my feelings about that, I wanted to share a poem. Resolution. Resolution. Welcome to the new revolution. This will not be fought with guns and swords. Those are useless weapons to now be ignored. The battle rages deep within, stamped and restricted by our perception of sin. Are they really sins, or simply lessons to hold dear? Offering beautiful gifts if we simply let them appear. Take a deep breath and sink into stillness and wait. Patiently wait for the gem to emerge. Let it spin and swirl before you like a dancing child. Drink in its beauty and let it be wild. Let it surround you and fill you deep inside your core, knowing ancient wisdoms live in every crevice and pore. Taste of its sweetness and feel the bitterness it holds. For contrast and polarity unlock the wisdoms we hold. Step into it with newfound boldness, knowing it will melt that deep-held coldness. Now smell the vision that swirls up before you. Breathe in deeply so all can be revealed. And so one of the pieces that came from Joseph that I want to share is, I call it a contemplations. And I'll say it a few times. I'll talk through it, cite it a few times, and then I'll kind of talk about what it means to me and what it brings up for me. So, as the sacred feminine has been repressed, so too has the sacred masculine. When men hold their sweet boys in their hearts, and women are truly sisters, the world will be. So, as the sacred feminine has been repressed, so too has the sacred masculine. When men hold their sweet boys in their hearts and women are truly sisters, the world will be. I like to talk to it backwards. The world will be, that came up at first. It's like the world will be. The world will be what? The world will be happy. The world will be peaceful. It's like, no, the world will be, because I really think we're stepping into a time of being, to just allow ourselves to be there, and all that brings and all that unfolds, to move away from the doing until the allowing and the openness. Let's talk a little louder. Okay, thanks. When women are truly sisters, now that is a talk all in itself, and even a week-long retreat for women really to connect and truly be sisters with themselves. I mean, there's wonderful movements coming up. There's a lot of sacred feminine, but there's still some pieces. There's still some hurt and some wounds to heal and be there, and connecting with our sisters first and allowing the rest to open. So. A lot's already going on there. When men hold their sweet boys in their hearts, that one is just really touching to me. And that's one of the first pieces that came up in my meditations and contemplations with Joseph, is the phrase sweet boy. And it was just like, well, that's really interesting. I wonder what that means. And I chatted with a couple of girlfriends after that came up. And I said, I'm getting this phrase, I'm getting this saying, when men hold their sweet boys in their hearts. It's like, what do you think that means? And it's like, I'm not sure. And then one of my girlfriends said, she's like, oh, you need to change the word. Men just are not going to like that. Say sweet boy, you got to come up with something else. And I reflected and I just said, that's just what I keep hearing. That's just what I keep feeling. And so it was interesting. A few days later, she called me back, and she said, you're right. And I said, okay, I'm right about what? And she goes, men like that. Men relate to the phrase "sweet boy in their heart." She said there was someone she had met and didn't know him, and they were meeting for a lunch meeting, and they had a really good rapport, and we're talking about a lot of subjects. And she said, I'd like to just pose a phrase to you and see what your response is, and just respond to me. And she said, when men hold their sweet boys in their hearts, and she said it was just phenomenal, that there was just this tenderness and this softness, and he really responded. And so that's what I started doing too. I started talking to my men friends and said, can I talk to you about this phrase, about men holding sweet boys in their hearts? And with some of the men it was deeply touching. They were just so touched. Others, it was just an acknowledgement. It's like, oh yeah, that part of me, I want to connect, and that brings in my balance. So it's been, it's been really wonderful to share and to play with. And then of course, as the sacred feminine has been repressed, so too has the sacred masculine. And I think that's a piece that gets lost, is because the patriarchy and masculine so got intertwined, that it got confusing, and to realize there really is a sacred masculine. And so what does that look like? And that's the questions that I want to pose, and that's what I want to invite people to explore for themselves. What does sacred masculine look like? For me, I've kind of worked with some archetypes and potentially to turn into a divination deck, which I think could be really interesting. It's just what's coming up for you, what to look for. And the reflections I got 9 archetypes, and they kind of fall into 3 categories. And the one is, relation. So there's the grandfather, the father, the son, and the brother. And those are pretty typical. I think having the brother come up is really important. It's just a nice perspective that I think it brings in. I think just like with sisterhood, brotherhood's really nice, especially women and men, having like a brotherly relationship is really nice. And then there's kind of the roles where there's the nobleman, the craftsman, the warrior, and the lover. And then the third one is the divine. And so how I picture them is in a medicine wheel. So it's the 8 points, and they all cross in the center, and that's where the divine is. And to me, that's the time and the place that we're stepping into, is that we carry the divine within us, and it all reflects in everything we do. And also with having the nobleman and the craftsman, and the lover and the warrior, there's not a king, there's not a priest, there's not a shaman, that we all bring those aspects into ourselves. Yet in terms of the nobleman, there is, leadership is needed, and that's a role that's played. So someone who's like overseeing the community. The craftsman, of course, work being done, things being provided, working with their hands, all the richness that brings. Let's see, and of course the lover, just that wonderful aspect of the humanness that we have and the humanness that we share. And then the warrior, that protection is a piece that's kind of been consistent with the masculine that comes through. So, any questions? I'm kind of bringing up a lot and going through things, and I'd like to get a little bit more interactive. Yes?
I was wondering, Karen, if you were aware that there was another Joseph in biblical sense.
So I was asked if there's another Joseph. No, I don't think I'm following you. I've gotten this information. I've really kind of held back from researching because I didn't want to be influenced, and so I like other people to share. So what of that Joseph?
Well, there was another Joseph in the Old Testament. He's known as Joseph, the son of Jacob. Jacob being the figure who had his name changed by an angel to Israel. And Joseph was the 13th child that Jacob brought into this world. And his father cared for him quite a bit.
Yeah.
And treated him differently than his 12 other brothers. He landed up being sold into slavery and went into Egypt.
Now I know that story, yes.
He's responsible for the children of Israel coming into Egypt, compared with Moses, who was responsible for taking the children of Israel out of Egypt.
Yeah.
Very interesting story to be portrayed by your entire family, only to be expected to save them from famine and disaster later on in his life.
Yeah, when you started speaking to it, I do remember that. Yeah, with this piece, with the Joseph, and I like to refer to him as the earthly father, I think it just really can bring up, practical aspects, about being father. I know when I started speaking of Joseph, a lot of times the question is, was he the biological father or not? And when I pose that question, his response is, people will believe what they believe. People will believe what they believe, and it doesn't really matter if he's a biological father or not. It's, it's belief systems and choice and that thing. What's really important is he actively parented this Christ child. He actively parented this divine child, and it was with the phrase, that sometimes he's referred to as the step parent, and then it kind of morphed into, step into parenting. And that's a piece that he really holds an invitation to, is to look for, there are so many blended and mixed families that many of us get an opportunity to step parent. But beyond that, where are other opportunities that you can parent? And that can be from, watching a child for a friend, or even being, there's something about children in the market. I guess they're just so exhausted, and it's like the last stop before they go home. But just, and in the produce department too, but just, that's something I like to play and have fun with. If just, a child's kind of anxious, to just kind of walk by and, wink at them and try and engage them and try and shift that information, their activity and just bring something else in. And perhaps you're not a child person, but you could be supportive financially, you could just be supportive in prayer and those sorts of things. So kind of that phrase, you know, it takes a village to raise a child, to really look to ways to help out in parenting in a lot of directions. The Catholic Church refers to Joseph as the foster father. And at first that kind of bothered me, but then as fostering is actually really a wonderful word and really a nice way to convey the role that he played in this child's life. Yeah.
You might say that Joseph, the son of Jacob, fostered his entire family.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
That he was an interpreter of dreams.
Yeah.
And there was a dream he interpreted about how his whole family, including his mother and father, would eventually prostrate themselves before him. And they considered that to be, well, had something to do with the sun and the moon, of course, it was symbolic.
Yeah.
And eventually it came to pass.
Yeah.
Without even knowing who he was, because he became an Egyptian. He came and acted that out some 30 years later, and the prophetic dream came true.
Yeah. So I'm curious for reactions when you hear this stuff. You know, what does it stir within you? Do you have a concept of what sacred masculine is or should be, or how does it speak to you? You're speechless, you're captivated. Yeah.
As you're speaking about the young boy in the heart, I know for me, what really brings that forward for me into always a deepening of healing, of the tenderness of that young boy in the heart, is connecting with the sacred feminine here in a very deep and rich, truthful relating about myself. It always brings the tears, it always breaks the heart, and it always brings me closer to this place of loving myself like I've never loved myself before. And it's connecting with the sacred feminine in this ritual of that we do frequently, daily.
Yeah.
Sit down and make something I've seen about myself that's hard for me to be with.
Yeah.
And it opens up an ease of being in my heart that just breaks in a million pieces, and I don't even try to put it together again.
Oh, good.
So beautiful. So it's something that I confess that I cherish and I live for with this one. It's so rich and true, and helps me to really touch deeper into that place that I've so carefully covered over and blocked up through eons of time and experience. And
right.
who knows how long. But it's the connection, and the willingness to look at myself deeply and be honest about the wound, the secret hurt here.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Well, it's the sweet boy of the heart that
Sweet
men
boy of the
are
heart.
told not to let show. You know, to come
Yeah.
up whenever those tears come up, or that vulnerability, then you have to pretend like it's not there in our culture. It has to.
And I think that's the core thing. I think that's one of the things to really shift. And as I started speaking to this just one-on-one, it was the young women with sons that just said, oh, please start talking about this, you know, and help me know how to raise my son. You know, we want the sons to be different men. We don't want to put those blocks. We don't want to put those restrictions on. So that's just been wonderful. And to see younger parents really not squelching that, you know, really letting them be in their emotionality. And that's one of the things too, you know, we've kind of ascribed emotions to feminine. I don't think that's true at all. I think emotion is really pretty neutral. It may show a little different perhaps or not, but just really letting that emotionality come up and just moving forward to really change that about our time and our society and our culture, that it's okay and it's really honored. And the wisdom and like you spoke to, just the huge gifts that come out of that, being able to connect, being able to really open. That's why that's always just been such a wonderful, strong thing, and very touching to share. Very touching to share with the reactions. Anyone else? Yes, please.
Like the man up there said, it seems like getting in touch with the sacred feminine, at least for me, somehow opens up the sacred masculine. It seems like almost the one has to come before the other.
That's a really good point, you know. And I think the opening in the both of them is really so important, because that's the piece that came up strongly. Is just, this is not to, you know, I think with fears because of the patriarchy, it's like, oh no, the masculines, if you do that, they're going to take over again. And it's not. It's about balance. It's about harmony. It's about finding our personal balance. But then I think, you know, the more whole we can become and the more balanced we can become and the more in harmony we can come, that affects all our interactions. You know, in the market, you know, buying gas, just whatever, there's just this wonderful dynamic that opens up and really changes how we approach people and how we go out and function in the world. Anyone else?
I want to add to that piece.
Please.
I've just been more aware here of how it actually affects my whole life every time this occurs. Is there's a softening, but a much more clarity in my life, and with love. It's really a masculine. It's a wholeness. It's such a rich. It's a passionate piece. It's actually truly the masculine piece that's in its fullness of expression. To voice it here, but every time this occurs, my life has gotten real soft, rounded edges from a little real hard guy. And living this way for years that I've lived this way, and yet it's the end result of it is just such a beautiful harmony of the androgynous thing, coming into beautiful balance.
And just kind of my sensing, my awareness is just that will open up so much sensitivity that. You know, we'll all realize, you know, we don't have to activate so quickly. We don't have to go to anger or those sorts of things. There are other ways. It may be called for, and I believe that's the warrior piece. There are just times where, yes, you know, you connect, you're together. You know, we need to support the group, or you know, there's an individual piece. But I just think, you know, clarity is a great word. Just when to go into action and when not to, and just not. That's not automatically a first choice, that there's really some wisdom in there. In the back?
Again, to follow up, what I'm finding in my life is that the more receptive I am to what's really going on, the more purposeful and more effective is my masculine response. Because when I'm receptive, the conditioning is not running me. What's in front of me is running me. I'm responding rather to what's in front of me. So again, as the stronger the feminine gets, the more purposeful, the more powerful the masculine.
Thank you. Well stated. Elise?
Yeah, I'm just feeling into just being touched right now with the sense of the simplicity of the term sacred masculine. I think sometimes, in my life and in the lives of people that I know and spiritual community, it can be taken into a realm of it looks in a certain spiritual light. And I just want to speak to the fathers and the sons and the brothers who just connect and show up and are present. Maybe not perfect, maybe they don't even have a spiritual practice, but that they're present and showing up. And to me, that is kind of my new definition of sacred. It's just simply being human and showing up and connecting with your heart as best as you can. And I think sometimes we can just, I know for myself even, just bring it into something that is beyond
Yeah. Great.
So when you speak of Joseph, you speak of him as showing up in his practical way
Right.
to his child. That really does speak to me as a secret masculine. So
Yeah.
thank you. I'm just receiving that awareness.
And I appreciate, and then that's why I kind of was like, oh, I'll just ask people, because there's been so much information I've been given, and it's hard to remember it all. And I didn't want to be writing it madly down. But the humanness is the piece that really comes up for me too. Is within sacredness there is just this wonderful humanness, the passion, the joy of being in these bodies, and that's kind of my feeling why Joseph was repressed in the Bible, because he was the human component, and they wanted to hold it so much in this high divine rather than this humanness. And there were pieces that, when I would sit in meditation, I would have a very strong presence of Joseph. He's not constant with me. I don't feel it's a channeling. I remember stuff, and now it's just, usually I call him in. If there's just something I'm nervous about or I'm just needing support, I call him in and I have a sense of him. But for a while, very actively in my morning meditations, I just had a clear sense of presence. And like I said, with the other appearing, he kept wanting to appear, which makes me really uncomfortable. And people have kind of laughed at that, because, that if he would have appeared, it would have made me feel crazy, where people say, and I prefer him to talk into my head, and most people feel it the other way around. Well, if he appeared, it was really concrete, and if he talked in my head, it would be crazy. It's like, well, I'm a redhead, what can I say? But he would say, I'm really a handsome guy, Karen, come on, sit here with me. And so there's just this humanness and this wonderful sense of humor about it. And a way in a piece he did come in is I do Reiki, and so then in the sessions that I would be at one end and I would feel him at the other end of the person, and just kind of running masculine and feminine energies up and down a person's body, and then trading places, and just really rich and delicious. But I think that's the real core piece. There's really practical information, and I think it's too bad, but I accept that it wasn't done that way. But I think that's the piece that the sacred masculine can be, is just how to practically be in the world, and the shift away from this very, very spiritual, kind of almost out of body, is just with the masculine, present, focused. I'm overseeing things, I'm the craftsman, I'm making things, I'm getting things done. I'm actively parenting, I'm a lover, I'm compassionate, I appreciate women, and that real wonderful humanness to really bring that in. And at the same time, like with the archetypes in the center, is feeling the divine within, and just knowing that and coming from that place. So again, a personal balance. So anyone else? I'll give somebody else a moment.
Well, I'm centering on the word sacred,
Uh-huh.
and then I'm also centering on the masculine-feminine duality, and I'm finding the phrase that resonates for me is honoring truth with action. And I'm feeling that, I'm in trying to create an association for both masculine and feminine. Commonly we have the feminine being receptive, and the masculine being active, and the feminine being feeling, and the masculine being thought or analysis.
Yeah.
And of course that's very distant things for men from their feelings and their bodies. So
Right.
this is a duality. We can't, it doesn't work as a cut and dried, this is one and this is the other.
Yes.
So, but it is true that thought, that if we're going to attune to right action, which is of course as imperative today as it's ever been, simply emotions, for example, emotions can connect us with the deep need to attune to the mother goddess and the honoring of nature and dealing with all this environmental travesty. But if we simply react out of our feelings, then we can get angry, we can be frustrated, we can be violent, and not effective.
Right.
So while action is imperative and feeling is imperative, attunement to truth is what's going to enable us to walk the line towards an action that will be both balanced and effective. So that's
And that kind of speaks to the piece of the, of course, being in a woman's body, I'm not going to experience it, but just the reflections as, a sweet boy and a man, it's that balance where the man's wanting to take action, but there's a sweet boy going, well, let's just think about it, maybe not, and just so that there can be this dialogue to really come up with a wise decision and a wise choice. And I think there are times when the sweet boy will know, yes, action, firmness, that's definitely needed. And there are times where the sweet boy can bring in that softness. It's like, this really isn't needed and necessary right now. So that's how I feel it, but then that's my perspective, being in this body. So
I wanted to speak to the idea of the sacred masculine that might best be worded as the strong, silent type. If you take a look at in most of the artwork, Christian artwork, that has depicted Joseph throughout history, depicts Joseph as the strong, silent type, often not the main actor in the image that is being created, usually standing in the background. One might say somewhat obscured as to what is being expressed.
yes.
But if one were to take in the entire image, one could not avoid including that. One of the interpretations of emotionality, especially in current day and time, is one of expressiveness, of demonstrative expression. That there is an aspect, one might call it the masculine aspect of emotionality, that is the receptive side of emotionality, the side that is not demonstrative and expressive, but is aware emotionally, that is being there and taking in what is going on.
Yeah, thanks, because that's a reminder too that my sensing with Joseph is, Jesus, Yeshua, of course, was this incredible being who was going to step forward to preach to the world, and he was the behind the scenes, and he was very content to be there. He didn't feel slighted. That was his place, and he fully accepted and wanted his place. And my sensing of Joseph is that he was a very knowledgeable, skilled, in studies and wisdoms, worked with his hands, just a very full person, but slightly out of the spotlight, and the power of that and how much that's needed. That so often we're wanting to be in the spotlight, but where we can best serve and where we can be so powerful is just slightly behind and being supportive, and just how rich and delicious that is. Anyone else? Yes, please.
Yeah, I've had a few things come up. One of the first things I wanted to share was that I've been raised in a more feminine dominance in my life. My parents divorced when I was 6, and I went to live with my mother for the rest of my life, seeing my dad from time to time. And it was brought to my attention from a friend of mine that was a poet. And he said, people like, guys like you and I, he was the same age as I. He said, guys like you and I have been taught to be lovers, and we focused in on being magicians because we like shamanism and doing psychedelics or whatever. We like connecting with God because that's the kind of environment we've been raised in, is this kind of receptivity. And that to really be all powerful in my life, I had to go into accepting what I feared, which was actually the king and the warrior. And because I didn't have a good role model for that, I thought it was a phony source of power, the king, because it was arrogant, and that I had to heal that to really own my own power and to use it in my life. And so I just find it interesting. I don't know if there's if it's a generation difference or just the different upbringings that we have. But the other thing is that for the thing about the sweet boy, I still find that to be a certain aspect of, it is a masculine aspect, even though it's all vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
That I've just been reading about this, so I wanted to respond to that. That it does touch something so deep, but it's like that original feeling of first coming into the world and feeling all vulnerable as an infant, but also being all powerful, being at the center of the universe at the same time. That's still an aspect of masculinity, even though it's very vulnerable.
Thanks, wonderful reflections, and it was really clear that the warrior is a vital part. The warrior does play a part, and I know my warrior, and so again, how you step into it when it's called for and what it feels like, and finding that balance for you. And I imagine there are definitely generational pieces, just because how things shift and change. I know when my parents are in their mid-80s, and there's some pieces of their generation that challenge me deeply. And I'm ready to have the conversations with my daughter. What of my generation challenges you deeply? So yeah, there's always generational pieces, but speaking and bringing awareness so that, the boys that we have now, we can just hold space for them to become amazing men. Anyone else? Please. Can you speak up a little bit? No shouting, just a little more volume.
Yeah. I think a lot of the reason a lot of would-be patriarchs we see every day don't seem to allow themselves to be fathers and to take care of other people as a real father or real patriarch should, is because they never had that space out for them. They
Mm-hmm.
to be the sweet boy that was punished.
Mm-hmm.
And they would never nurture themselves by that was messed with. Sweet boy wasn't held to be sacred. And their innocent action. They weren't allowed to simply be.
Mm-hmm.
So then they end up doing what we see today.
Yeah.
Would be patriarchs or very fatherly role.
Yeah, I agree, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I can really feel the place of compassion that it's coming from. And that's really important, and I think that's been the lack, that there just haven't been role models. And that's kind of the sadness I feel around Joseph, that to me there was just potentially this really rich experience for this wonderful masculine role model, fathering this magical child, being in loving relationship, being an active member of his community, being an active member of his spiritual community, being in brotherhood, all these wonderful, delicious, full, rich pieces. Which I believe is who he is, which I believe is how he lived his life. But those stories haven't been told. Those stories aren't there. Yes?
Can I share one more thing? I have a 14-year-old son who lives with me, and his dad lives in New Jersey. And I'd like to say two things. For a while, I judged my former spouse to be just not the perfect masculine representation that I wanted my son to have, and just being honest with that. And I've known myself and other women around me to become hardened to allowing their boys to experience masculine energy because they're trying to protect them from some of the maybe more polarized aspects of patriarchy and such. And I just want to just share that my experience now is that when I am able to look at my former spouse and see his gifts and focus on them and focus on the parts of him that do show up. For a long time, I was unable to do that as a woman. And now when I'm able to do that for my son, and when he's there, he's actually there right now. He just left a couple days ago to be with his dad. I get a sense of rightness that my son needs to be with his dad, and that maybe his dad isn't perfect, but that the more I open my heart to men in general, that the shifting can happen from a creative point of view, from my own creation of the whole situation. So I'm working on that. I just wanted to speak to that for any mothers in here, or for any no mothers that are doing this. And it's tricky for each family. But I know for myself, it feels I can see the change in my son since I've opened my heart more to his dad.
Yeah, they're there for a reason, because one of my beliefs is we choose our parents, and so they chose them. Although, not too long ago with my mom and dad, I was really questioning that. But that's part of the process too. It's just, those persons are needed in their lives, and for the diversity and the experiences and the gifts they bring. So, thanks for that. And it's a real challenge. Anyone else? Yes, please.
It's really interesting to hear your perspectives on Joseph, and just thinking about my role right now in my life. I'm partnered with a woman that has 2 young daughters, and I just invited her into my home a few months ago, several months ago, and whether it's almost like this thing has come forth in me that it doesn't really matter, like our bloodline. That it's like I kind of get this feeling with Joseph, like something comes forth in you that says, "This is your role now. No matter how long it lasts." There's an archetype in there that's like, "I'm going to serve now," and it's like whether I choose it or not. And I know that it's not to be like dominated by it, but it's like, okay, something's coming forth now to serve in this situation, and then like adjustments are made in my life to make that appropriate. And just kind of recognizing some harmony with that, but really appreciating seeing your story.
Yeah, and that was after the sweet boy, that was the other piece that came up, is just really talking about parenting, and that they are, and step into parenting. There's so many ways to parent, and instead of being concerned about, this really isn't my child, or how long is this relationship going to last, or any of those kind of things. It's just, sometimes you can just, like I said, you can have an encounter in a market, and you can just, cautiously and carefully, and that pull and that rightfulness, and step into parenting and really be helpful. Because there's sometimes, that it just is really as helpful. The parent's overwhelmed, and they're lost. So when someone can step in and just do something, or just make a comment or a wink, or just shift the energy, it's just amazing how helpful that can be. And with so many single parents, primarily single mothers, the challenges they'll bring, and we can so easily be of service in such simple and easy ways. One thing I like to do is occasionally babysit, and if it's a couple, then it's go out on a date, and I'll be home with the child, and so spend couple time, but just being with that child and having fun, and getting to do that piece, and being in that energy, and giving them a break. And because that was something that was not gifted to me when my girls were younger, and so I just really appreciate the gift of it. And that, so we're about at the break time, so we can just kind of like pause and refresh for a little bit, and then. So, are you wanting to come back and discuss some more questions, or are we at a place where we could kind of even complete?
Let's take a break
and regroup. Okay, good. So we usually go for about 10 minutes. Thanks. Start with another poem, and then I had a wonderful suggestion to just go into meditation for a while. Just kind of guide it a bit, give us some time, and just then regroup. And everyone's seeming to want to talk and chat, which is really exciting. That was my hopeful intention for the evening, to plant seeds and watch it develop and bubble within each of us. Sweet boy. Ah, sweet boy, with a gentleness that swirls around you and a fire that burns deep within. Radiance, aliveness, play and glee. Divine energy washes over thee. Innocence, wisdom, sacred being, bring joy and laughter as I watch you grow. Who you become and where you go are simply a map inside your soul. Ancient wisdom support you, and the future calls, swirling around each other, gently riding over the falls. The gift of your sweetness that you bring to me is simply your precious being who spends time with me. So just get comfortable in your chair. Deep breaths. Breathe in deeply, deep into your stomach. And also in your chest with your whole body. In through your nose. Out through your mouth. Let any tensions or stress that you feel be released with your breath. Take them to resolution. And let us fully come together in this place, in this space, at this moment, at this time. Let our higher selves and our inner wisdoms bring forth information. Let us speak to us about what we feel of the sacred masculine, what that stirs within us, how we want to step forward with it, what comes up so that we can heal, what comes up so we can share with others, to really let this ripple and flow forward so we can really find sacred unions and wholeness and harmony and grace. drawn. Come back to the present. Any insights? Please.
Yeah, as I was sitting here, I just was kind of tuning into my personal experience as a daughter. And it kind of goes along with what was said earlier. You know, I grew up with not really having a lot of examples of a loving relationship between males and females, moms, dads, grandparents, a lot of divorce in my family, and kind of having what I would call an emotionally unavailable father, and a lot of that, kind of that quality of emotional unavailability or an unavailability for whatever reason with a lot of the men in our family. But I think there's a lot of pieces to this, but there's been a lot of healing with me, with males in the family, and not just with me, but within our family, and a lot of where my father and my grandfather are expressing their emotions in a way they haven't before. And you know, I think part of that's age, and I think another part of it is me just really honoring what they have to give. You know, like showing up for me in a real physical way, and giving me advice about cars, or you know, about all those things that I really need. And I think as I've accepted that, how they are able to show up for me, they're actually starting to show up in these other ways, in these emotional ways for me that I wouldn't have expected. You know, wanting to talk about their feelings with me, and I think the more that I'm just expressing my feelings, they feel more comfortable in doing that with me. It's just really incredible. And you know, and I think that transformation is happening with a lot of people, not only men, but just showing up the way they can, and having people receive that, and then meeting each other halfway, and so yeah, I'm just really grateful for that. And Elise has helped me too, working with her. So, it's hard to put into words, but I think I'm kind of putting it into words.
Yeah, no, it was delightful. Thank you. That's just really rich and profound. And I think, you know, that speaks to is just very little. A lot of times it's just a real little shift that's needed. You know, or just doing something with a consciousness can really have a profound effect. You know, if we're going to believe in, and really letting someone be who they are and where they are, and just the acceptance and the compassion and the love with that, rather than having your agenda and your expectations and those things. You know, speaking your truth, being present. Thanks.
Yeah, just my download was just a reminder. There's a teacher by the name of David Data, and he was speaking with regard to the way that the feminine sees the masculine. And he was saying that in each man, there is a part of them that's very trustable. In each of us, there's a part of us that's trustable, and there's a part of us that is already there, you know, and that, you know, our practice as women is to call that part out and to see it and to call it out. And that was just what I received, that a reminder of that, of all men, just instead of focusing on what they're not or what they need to be or what, you know, just to allow my vision to zero in on the part of them that is trustable, and allow my heart to open to that. And I think that that's when they're able to actually show up in a different way, because you're in that co-creative space with allowing it to happen. So thank you. That's a very great reminder for me tonight. I appreciate being here and getting that information.
Anyone else? Yes, please.
Well, as other people said, reminded me of stages in my life, and I was remembering when I was 12 and 13, and I wasn't getting enough support from my dad, because my dad was very analytical, even though he was always there, but he was an analyst. So it's hard to step back into being emotional with his family. And I remember when I was 15 or 16, I started like really wanting him to give me hugs. And I reclaimed that part of myself, which was interesting because it was, you know, that was before I took drugs, and I was a neurotic, suppressed 15-year-old. But he would take me to high school, and I would, you know, we would then start hugging, and it gave him permission. And I can remember when I was a child, going from the very small child stage to the bigger boy stage, maybe when I was 5 or 6, and the big boys don't cry, and they don't express emotion. And I think really part of it had more to do with him, because he was going through the 60s thing, and I think he was probably just getting closer to me wanting to give him permission to be that way with me. I can't really explain it, but it did just happen in the 60s. And then something that you said, please, reminded me of how after I left home when I was 18 or 19, and I was doing a lot of, you know, internal processing, that was the period when I started blaming my parents for all my problems. And of course, hey, it was their fault, right? But, and I remember my sister also going through that stage when she was maybe 17 and 18, and just being super critical of our parents. And until finally we could just, I mean, I still see it happening now, of course, all ages, but the point is to forgive people for what they were and go, look, we all had to be in the now and say, you know, where can we come together in love? And oh yeah, I mean, to say to my mom, you know, you really messed me up when I was 2 for leaving me in the car when you went shopping. And I mean, I still have deep inner traumas that I'm dealing with, you know, in part of my processing and my stuff today. But my mom, I mean, she's the most wonderful mom I've ever, you know, of every mom I've ever met. And so like, okay, I'm now doing my own work, and I love you and I forgive you. I mean, I don't even need to go there with her anymore. I mean, you know, that was a long time ago. She was 22. I mean, you know, she was a confused young mom. Anyway, so it's just interesting how different things come up at different ages, and I think maybe there's things that came up for all of us at certain ages, but maybe it's also we have to, if they didn't come up, maybe it's time right now to forgive my mom and my dad for, you know, what happened to me when I was whatever that age. But I do think certain ages trigger those things, but maybe we're always processing.
I think so. Please.
I was kind of getting out of that phase is really great, because like last year, like I had this experience with my dad, and like I was upset with him because he would never ever like emotionally be supportive, and like his idea of emotionally being supportive is fixing things.
Yes.
And so like my dad's like, what? I just fixed the problem for you. What are you complaining about? And I'm like, I just want you to sit and talk with me. And then my dad, he's like, I know how we'll fix it. You tell me you need imaginary land time. And it's really cool because now I call him when I'm having a bum day. Like I'll call him when I'm stressed out or upset about something. And I'm like, Dad, I need imaginary time. Give me 5. And he's like a lawyer. He's crazy busy. But like it's really strange because he's kind of like shifted his priorities as I stepped out of being angry with him for not like doing the stuff. Like I went on a tirade with him, you know, and like it was really weird. That's what my tirade brought, was just like, okay, imaginary land, we'll switch it, you know.
Nice. That's nice. Yeah. And your story reminded me of one with my father and one of my nephews, that he had gone away to college and came back into town and we were all at a concert at South. Most of my family, we went to South High. And then my dad saw John, and he put out his hand. He goes, "Oh, you're a college man. I guess I need to shake your hand." And it was so sweet because John just grabbed him and he said, "No, you're my grandpa. We're always hugging." And my dad was like, "Oh, good." He would, he was given that permission, and that was his rule. But Jonathan was like, "Nah, you're my grandpa. I'm hugging you in peace." And then just kind of almost like a sidebar, but as this information came up for me, and I hope you'll go forward to start observing, because at first it's like, wow, what am I going to find out there? And I just see so many Joseph examples, and I see so many sweet boys, and young men speak to it, and so that's really exciting to me, because at first it's like, oh my gosh, is this just going to be a huge thing? But it's like, no, it's there, and seeing it and acknowledging it. And I did some video production for a while, and a group of men, probably, they're like 30s, early 40s, and they're out of the punk generation. So they're pierced and they're tattooed, and they are incredible fathers. That they would come in and children were welcome, and here's these guys playing Barbies. And it was just so delightful. And I realized, that just so wins my heart when someone's a good father. It's just so wonderful, and just that peace that, women don't bring, because we're not supposed to. Just the peace. And so that's what's been really nice about this, is how much I'm seeing is really there, and the stories you're all speaking to. And I'm a real hopeful person, and so that just feeds my hope. Anyone else? Please.
I'll just speak to that part where you said what women don't bring because we're not supposed to. And one of the reasons I came tonight was that I feel like I have to start to develop, and kind of led by the promotion for your talk, my sacred masculine, So I was waiting for that, and that was my intention to ask that question in this part of the talk. So of course, when I went into meditation, that was really what came up for me, and what emerged was, well, I'm really already, and all these examples of showing me of how I'm already being decisive and taking action and doing as much masculine as I actually want to do. I don't want to be any more masculine. And then I kind of came back to it like, well, but then there's this part of my life that's not really working in that part. And what came through was, well, that doesn't mean that you won't have pain and suffering, even when that, the masculine is present, it's there too.
Yeah.
So that was really very sweet for me.
Yeah, wonderful, thank you. And that triggered a share that is how all of this has been so deeply healing for me, because I was very aware of my masculine, and so I got very left brain dominant because that was highly rewarded. Programming, it pays very lucrative, so I could support my family, but here was my ex, and he just was not stepping in the provider. He had health issues. He was home with our girls more. I thought I was supposed to be the mom. It just, really difficult years for me, really a lot of anger and a lot of resentment. And as this information came up and understanding the masculine and the compassion, it was like, oh, that's what that was about. So there is a level that I do understand, having lived in some ways, a pretty masculine life, being the primary wage earner, doing those sorts of things. And then to shift it and kind of go, okay, I no longer need to be there. Where do I really want to be now? And finding that balance and finding the pieces, and when to call in the feminine and be in that space, and when to call in the masculine and be in that space. So it's often conscious choice, or often just just happens. But having thought about it and contemplated and worked with it, it's been really, really, really helpful. Deeply helpful. It's like, that's why I sat in that cubby all those years. Okay. And I remember sitting there going, what am I doing here? And I would hear, you just need to be here for a while. You just need to be here for a while. I was like, okay, thanks, guys. But so, yeah, how those experiences come. Anyone else? Yes, please.
I just want to respond to what this gentleman said earlier about forgiving your parents. I experienced something very similar when I was like, it seemed like it wasn't until like I was 21. That's really when I actually left living near my mom and started to experience her more as a friend, and also realized that she was a human and not just,
Yes, oh, that piece.
Yeah, and it seemed like just recognizing her as a human is what brought that forgiveness. It's like, oh, you have a fucked up life just like me. And I just realizing that somehow that just came to me.
Yeah, and that's the piece too that I said before, is that this human element, and just really embracing that and appreciating it and what it brings. And then for me, the way I relate to it is just this great body, just being in a body, and that you can walk and smell and taste and make love and just all those incredible things that come from being in a body, and appreciating that and connected to the earth. Yeah. Anything else?
I think we see a lot of people who have a lot of institutional power who are very afraid of losing that. And people who don't want to confess that they're human.
Yes.
Or, maybe parents or grandparents or whatever. And yeah, I've seen it also in like other official capacities. People want to not confess that they're human.
Yeah, because it's all about being right and being perfect.
Because what's going to happen if people recognize that this person is capable of making mistakes?
Yeah.
It's not like we're not going to notice, but
Yeah.
it kind of gets cling to that.
Yeah, being who we are and where we are. It's, it's challenging at first, but it grows. Yes, please.
I just have a quick comment with that. And I think that's changing. I think that in the institutions and in the politics and in businesses, it's becoming harder and harder to hide what's true. So I think if we hold that hope, we're already seeing it, that things can transform.
And then, finding your truth and speaking your truth. It's just really powerful. It's amazing how it goes. Like, the one piece I miss is I bring Kleenex because I'm really on a motor, and I often just go to tears. And the more that I speak to that, the more open I'm about that, or just say, okay, I'm going to wind up crying. So. That just kind of diminishes it, or there's just an acceptance. And for me, then just speaking to it is just to start to dissipate the embarrassment that has just been so much around that. So honor who we are, speak to what it is, speak to the uncomfortable that's been there. And then the shifts are just phenomenal that can happen. And then also knowing your truth and speaking it, and then that's it, not having, without expectation. I don't have an agenda, I'm not expecting this certain reply, I'm just going to state what's going on for me and see what response I get. And that's been really wonderful. It's just far beyond I can imagine. Just like this evening, I kind of plotted out the evening but stayed loose. And it's like, this is just better than I could have imagined, just the interaction and the exchange. So, please.
That point you just made, I think, was a new one, and that is stating your truth, which in ways it could be a warrior statement, but then to not be attached to making that work. Now that's where we get into the sacred aspect.
Yes, thank you.
And maybe that also relates to what you said about our president, for example.
One example among many.
We could give them the benefit of the doubt and say, well, they thought they needed to go fight these other people to protect the women and children of America. But then when it patently doesn't work, to have the strength to say, this didn't work, the world's not safer, and they don't have that strength, or it's not a political reality, we don't know.
Yeah.
But we can make our statement and say, I believe in peace, I believe that this is not going to work, and I'm willing to make my stand for peace and not have to go hit them or or go outside of what we consider appropriate behavior. And then that's our stand. Our stand is we will do what we believe is right within what respects all other people and all life, and then what will be. That's all we can really do. So, I mean, that's kind of like the nonviolent, you know, when I had this realization when I was 12, when I was 17, and I was at Berkeley, and all this stuff was going down, and I said, you know, the polluters may be destroying the world, but I am not going to take a gun to shoot a polluter, because that's just as immoral what they're doing. And so what can we do? Well, we have to do what we can do, and that's what we can do. And so that modeling that behavior, so, and whether that means not being attached or whether it means staying within assertion without aggression, I mean, I think
Right.
there's a lot of ways that can be.
I agree, and there are times. There are times for the warrior. There are times to draw a sword, absolutely, absolutely. But just really knowing that.
What comes to mind too, it's kind of pulling all these pieces together, is sacred masculine role now in proper use of energy, the direction of energy and delegation, knowing, holding space. You know, we've been talking about holding space and direction, and knowing that you can't hold space and lead just you. You have to delegate here or there. So maybe that's like a new manifestation of the sacred masculine is.
Or in discovery. Or in discovery.
And I just want to say, I don't think it's actually so new. I think that there have been tribes and
Oh,
indigenous
yes.
peoples all around the world that understand how to make government work and how to make communities work. And I really, I sent out a prayer and an intention for those elders to step forward even more than they are, and to share some of those traditional, those native societies that really understood the place of sacred feminine, sacred masculine, because they existed.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
They exist.
They
And
do.
I think we can learn a lot. So just calling them out.
Yeah, because a lot of Native American tribes, the grandmothers declared war, went to the grandmother council, and they were the ones determined, and sometimes they declared war because it was needed. But just kind of this balance, yeah. Or then if, the chief was having issues, he went to the grandmother's council, and often, sometimes the council was for him to step down because of circumstances, and there was no dishonor in that. There was no dishonor in that. It was just time for a shift, and they were making the best choice for him in his life and what was going on. And so getting rid of that rigidness and bringing in this balance and questioning and getting a lot of input to make wise choices. Yeah. Anything else? Please.
It seems that what I've been looking at it as kind of a progression, and it seems like the masculine's kind of been on the run for my lifetime anyway, since the 50s. And I make a connection with the atomic bomb. Yeah, it seems like the male spirit somehow became impotent after that. In the 50s was real indicative. I mean, you saw people trying to find themselves in roles, middle class roles of families, and cars and homes, And I think it took, it went on the run a little more with the feminist movement. It kind of went underground almost completely, it seems like. And what we got left with was a kind of a male power image that has been depleted of its real strength. It's kind of a facade, and it's a huge compensation, which is why I think we get institutions like our current government. It just doesn't function well any longer. Its real strength, its real wisdom is gone. And it has seemed to me since the 60s that the one source of prayer to change that, to shift that, what the male has needed, was the feminine spirit, the acceptance of the feminine spirit. And it's kind of been a struggle to be, at least for myself, I think, it's really empowering to hear these two women talk, and yourself as well, because it kind of poses a real shift from anything I've heard in a long time. Women, I've always, if they could, the little boy in me has gone nowhere. I think it just sits idly by, waiting for an okay to come out, just to say it's okay to be. I don't think men are oblivious to it at all. I think I have much more emotional experiences and conversations with male friends than I do with female friends. I don't know if I'm kidding myself, but there's more of an honesty and an openness there with my male friends.
Yeah.
And the feminine seems to be very guarded. They're very weary of men, and even though the conversation doesn't seem to lend itself to that, but there's such a mistrust there that there's almost no opening for a conversation, even though they say they want us to open up. It doesn't feel available somehow. So I really want to thank you for bringing this conversation live, because it seems like it's, I've never known how to say it before. I don't, it's not like a feminine responsibility by any means, but it's kind of letting the pendulum swing back more to the center, so that we can start participating together in this, and there aren't any enemies. We're kind of in the same boat here, trying to get on with it. Time's right, it seems like.
Yeah, that's my feeling. Thank you.
I think that's so
gorgeous.
beautiful. Before the break, that one gentleman was talking about the feminine having to come first within himself in order to, and then the masculine can come out being more powerful. And what I'm getting about this whole thing is that it really is, and with the return of the goddess coming back so powerfully, in my experience since the December solstice, when she just came forth and she just descended, and she said, we're not doing it this way anymore. In a sacred circle I was in, very powerfully, actually through me, but even just as that vehicle to deliver the message that we are not doing it the patriarchal way anymore, And what happened in that experience was it actually shattered the energy so much that it could reform into that softness of the Divine Mother and the presence in both the male and female within the circle. But what I'm seeing is like it really does take the woman going back to the sacred divine feminine, which then creates the container that truly the man feels safe to come into with that divine masculine. And it is, I think, the women coming back and coming into their own integrity and to truth of holding the space for the masculine to come into that softness and to really swing the pendulum of the over-masculinity that we have in society, that's in the governments or whatever, to that point of being androgynous, basically. And it's not about, the women who are in government doing it like the men are doing it. It's not about that. It's really doing it from that soft, motherly way of the mother gives life, and she knows how to nurture life, and that's what we all have to, in my opinion, come back to.
And I think it's important too to distinguish that the patriarchy is not the masculine.
Right.
Yeah, that's one of the
That's
keys.
a
It's so
misconception.
strong, really, just really clear to see it, is to disconnect those. The patriarchy is the patriarchy. The masculinity was ascribed to it, to a great disservice, but, it's not masculine. To let it be what it is. And then to really start looking at masculine. What is masculine? Like I said, so many things are ascribed to gender, and they're not about gender. They aren't. We've labeled them. But if you really reflect into it, it's just, we don't need that labeling. It is what it is. It is what it is.
There's a theory of culture or society called social interactionism, and basically that would be that we create our culture, our reality in everyday interactions all the time. And reality is then negotiated. So who has power in a situation, what the inequalities are, those are all negotiated and affirmed in our actions and our reactions. And so when you think about it, sometimes there's two ways to be with that. One is to feel very powerless because you're only one person and all of us are interacting and solidifying and holding in time the patriarchy or whatever it is that we're struggling with. But we are creating it. I mean, and these are social scientists that are being able to describe accurately situations and cultures using those kinds of creationists. So we have that power to in our interaction, to be the biggest person that we can be. And when we are the biggest person, then that inspires the other person, to be bigger and to match your honesty and to match your tenderness. And so we all have that power to create our own lives that way. And then it just spreads.
Yeah. Please.
First, I want to say that I come from a culture that is matrilineal and matriarchal. And that did not deprive any men of their masculinity that I know about.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly not my father and my brother and myself. And I'm about to say some things that might be a little bit controversial.
Good.
About the masculine.
Hey, stir it up.
Strictly from a biological point of view, I don't know if people are aware of this, that the development of a male fetus requires the interplay of certain biochemistry for a very brief window of opportunity that determines that it will be male. Mm-hmm. That the basic blueprint, you might say, of all mammals and possibly other creatures as well, is that they are inherently female.
Mm-hmm.
Except for this very brief influence over the development of the fetus. Mm-hmm. That it is fairly well known statistically that women live longer than men. And that it might be quite a misnomer to call women the weaker sex.
You think?
So there is a very significant fragility to the masculine. Mm-hmm. And with the industrialization of the world, the production of materials that haven't existed before are inherently estrogen mimetic and are in fact significantly waging biological warfare on the masculine.
Well, let's shift that. Keep that balance. Yeah, interesting stuff's out there.
So the macho bravado and the stronger aspects of things is very much a surface phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's another piece of getting real, finding your sacred feminine, your sacred masculine. Where is your sacred union? What is your makeup? And really going into the individuality that's just so delicious and is there. So, well, we're getting close, so I wanted to finish with one more poem. And I really thank you for your participation. This has just been beyond my wildest dreams. Okay, don't do that. Joseph, earthly father of the Christ, what role you chose to play? Quietly behind the scenes, modeling the way. And now is the time to make your presence known. Keeper of the sacred masculine, share with us your knowings, what it is truly to be a boy, a man, a father, a lover, a brother, a warrior, and a son. To hold that divine masculine present in its true essence. Open within me compassion for your role. For as the sacred feminine has been repressed, so have you, carrier of the sweet boy, the light who came to shine the way. Some question if you are the father of the sweet boy, yet what matters is that you step forward to parent this magical child. May we all see the magic in our children and hold a safe container for their true essence to blossom and grow. So I deeply thank you for your time.
Thank you.
RVML Resource Center is a volunteer-operated federal 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit organization. RVML is dedicated to providing easy access to a comprehensive collection of information on a variety of metaphysical, spiritual, and personal development subjects. RVML accepts and appreciates all donations. Material and monetary contributions are fully tax-deductible. This recording is not copyrighted, and permission is granted to broadcast, exhibit, or duplicate all or part of this program for non-commercial educational purposes. This live presentation was organized and presented by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. For more information, please visit rvml.org.